Welcome back to Day 2 of AlterCOP Australia. This is the second session, so it's really wonderful to see you all, and I'd like to extend an especially warm welcome to those who've joined us. Can I just have a show of hands? Who's new? Who's new to the audience? Okay, yay. Oh, there's a lot. Great. Okay, well, it means that what I say won't be too boring to you then, because you won't have heard it. So, across the next 4 days, you should know that more than 1,500 people will attend AlterCOP events all around the country. Now, this is a really strong sign of how Australians are stepping into climate action at every level. For our new arrivals, I'll just mention that AlterCOP is a climate movement for all. After the success of AlterCOP29 in Singapore last year, where over 2,300 participants and 250 speakers, the global team partnered with People for Nature to bring this community-led climate event to Australia. I should also mention that this AlterCOP is being held in 13 other countries at the same time, mostly in Asia Pacific, but we've had a couple take it up in Europe as well. So this is a movement. It's not just an event at the precinct, this is a movement that's happening here. And obviously with Australia hosting COP31, there's no better moment to spotlight the local climate solutions that are already happening in our cities, suburbs and regions. My name is Sarah Woolmington and I'm the founder and director of Impact Dragonfly, and I am your MC for this evening's session. So my work focuses on helping organisations turn sustainability strategy into meaningful, practical action. I am also a proud ambassador for People for Nature. You would have seen all of our volunteers in purple shirts. This is People for Nature in action. They are the national organisers of AlterCOP here in Australia, and together our mission is to broaden climate participation and make sure that community voices are at the centre of this transition. I would like to offer a big thank you to our volunteers supporting today. And just so you know, every single person that's volunteered today has done this off their own back. And an incredible thank you to our green sponsor, Mott MacDonald, for making this program possible. I would also like to acknowledge that AlterCOP30 is held on unceded First Nations land. Land never ceded and still cared for by its traditional owners. And we honour elders past and present, and we extend this respect to Indigenous people globally, and especially including the First Nations of the Amazon hosts of COP30. Before I continue, just a quick reminder that the toilets and exits are located near the lifts. Please switch off your phones to silent. However, feel free to share as much content online about us, and the hashtag is AlterCOP Australia, and we are here to really amplify the movement. And if you have any questions, please make sure that you ask our volunteers because they're here to help. So water in a warming world. Too much, too little, too dirty. This final session that we have is all about that water is one of the clearest mirrors we have of a warming planet. And one of the most pressing challenges for communities everywhere. Around Australia and across the world, people are facing extremes. Too much through floods, too little through drought, and just too dirty through contamination and pollution. And these impacts shape every part of our life, our health, our ecosystems, our food systems, our economies, and the well-being of our communities. Today's conversation brings together a diverse perspectives to explore what it truly means to manage water in a climate-affected world. We're going to examine risks, opportunities, and the realities facing both cities and regions. And we'll ask the essential question, what will it take to secure reliable, clean water for all? Now, we have a Slido link on the screen, and we are collecting comments, insights and discussion points throughout the day. So feel free to use the QR code and be sure to make sure you mention the panel that you've been sitting in when you make your comment. But before we begin, we want to ground this session in the voices of young people, those who will live with the long-term consequences of the choices that we make today. So we asked youths across Australia, how does water impact your life? And their reflections remind us that water is more than a resource. It's connection, identity, safety, continuity, and future security. So let's hear from them now.
Water is essential to everyday life. Having access to clean drinking water means you don't have to rely on expensive bottled water, and being able to wash and stay clean has a huge impact on comfort and well-being. On the other hand, issues like floods or water restrictions remind us of how vulnerable our cities can be when water isn't managed sustainably.
Generations to come. Water in city life. Water impacts city life in so many ways. It sustains us, connects us, and sometimes reminds us of our limits as well. In Brisbane specifically, we've experienced both floods and dry seasons, and both have shown us all how deeply our lives depend on good water management. Beyond just what we drink, water shapes how our cities grow and how we adapt to climate change. It's a reminder that living sustainably also means living in balance with the natural systems.
How does water impact my life? I drink a lot of water every day. In Brisbane, we're constantly hot and sweating, and it was just a 37-degree day yesterday, and then on Sunday it was storming with hail, so I think we're constantly surrounded by water in Queensland. We're very close to both the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast. I'd say it impacts my life strongly. Without water, without my emotional support water bottle, which is what all the kids call it, I'd be lacking emotional support if I didn't have it, but I probably wouldn't survive because I'm constantly trying to replenish the water I'm losing from all of the exercise I do and just from being in a hot climate. And you can probably hear right now, it's currently pouring with rain outside in Brisbane, so it kind of is showing the extreme shocks between extreme heat to starts pouring with rain. It's currently spring right now in Brisbane, but it feels like summer.
Water to me is one of our most important resources and something that I think many people in Brisbane appreciate. Whilst we see water everywhere, with the river and the ocean, the sea, I think it's important to also have access to understand how privileged we are to have access to the water that we do. Even today, I know people who rely solely on tank water so that when it doesn't rain, they need to get water delivered. And that comes at great economic cost to them, and it causes them a lot of stress and anxiety as well, not knowing whether it's going to rain or whether they're going to need to go down these alternate paths to be able to water their gardens and shower and have clean drinking water. Droughts are something that we've previously seen in Brisbane, but we've also seen floods. And therefore, accessibility to water is something that we need to be aware of and manage. But also, I think it's really important that we understand how things like climate change can influence this accessibility to water.
Living nearby the ocean, water is integral to life. It's a source of connecting with nature and pleasure. It's an essential life source for us and nature around us. But it can also be a destructive force when it turns into flooding, storms, or drought. Living with water means being able to drink it affordably and safely, and being able to replenish nature and ourselves, but also to live aside of it when it gets wild.
So for our panel today, I would like to introduce and welcome up to the stage our moderator. So Dr. Washington Sanchez is the founder of Glorious Water. He is an experienced scientific consultant and a project manager with more than 40 years in water treatment, and he has a diverse background across scientific and engineering industries. He holds a visiting senior scientist postdoctoral position at the University of Queensland. He's specialising in pharmacokinetics, God, I've said that so many times, and medical polymer research. He is also the founder of Glorious Water, which is focusing on drinking water quality and corrosion control, particularly for rural and self-sufficient communities. Now, Dr. Sanchez brings deep expertise in laboratory management, regulatory compliance, and technical troubleshooting with extensive experience collaborating across Australia and international institutions. Please welcome to the stage, Dr. Sanchez.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm impressed with myself. Sorry, I'm a bit of a comedian sometimes. Let's start. Welcome to water in a warming world. Too little, too much, too dirty. We already heard all those words, but we're going to explore it a little bit more in depth. We're here to explore how the climate extremes are reshaping our relationship with water, from the floods, droughts, pollution, equity. We're going to cover quite a few things. And hopefully I won't diverge too much from the list that we have here. We often talk about water only when it's up to our eyeballs. You know, there is a flood, it's coming through our corridors in our homes, through the roof, through the walls. We experience all those things. Many of us have, anyhow. And we also begin to talk about it when there is no water. Everything is dry, everything is dying, everything is gone. Like one of the in the video said, without water, well, we need to start getting deliveries if you're living on tank water, and you're still worrying about how much water we're using, etc. So today we'll connect the three vantage points: the engineering, the infrastructure side, the science and water quality and regulation, the human, social, and policy side of access and inclusion. Now, each panelist that I will be introducing shortly will share a few minutes introducing themselves and set the scene from their perspective, followed by a series of questions that we're going to interact. Again, I'll try not to diverge too much from those questions. So first, I'd like to welcome Meanjin Mendes. She's a chartered civil environmental engineer with over 7 years' experience in water resources and flood management. Meanjin has delivered hydrologic and hydraulic modeling for urban and rural catchments, supporting complex projects across transport, health, education, and energy sectors. Her work focuses on designing resilient systems to help communities live with rather than fight against water. That's awesome. Our next panelist, Vaitya Pambrum. I hope I pronounced it properly, and I asked you before, but unfortunately, I'm a little nervous. So next we welcome Vaitya, and a principal water quality scientist with the Queensland Department of Environment, Science and Innovation. Vaitya has a deep expertise in wastewater treatment, nutrient removal, and environmental regulation, with experience spanning Tahiti, French Polynesias, and Queensland. Her work ensures that what enters the waterways supports healthy ecosystems, sustainable industry, and safe communities. Please welcome Vaitya. And finally, Sharon McIntosh, an environmental and climate change scientist whose career bridges water and energy policy and infrastructure, sustainability, strategy and social impact. Sharon's work focuses on resilience, how policy, partnerships and community engagement can strengthen our response to water challenges here in Australia and globally. Welcome. Right. All comfortable? Now, let me just say something before we get started. If I start getting fidgety, I'm not used to talking while sitting down. I'm a lecturer, I'm a teacher, and so I like to pace and walk and interact and engage with everyone. So bear with me if I stray. So this first part, I'm going to ask a share from a question to all three, right? So when we talk about too little, too much, too dirty, it captures the whole spectrum of water challenges from your perspective: engineering, regulatory, and social. Which of these is the most urgent right now and why?
I'll start. I guess I work for Mott MacDonald, and I'm a civil engineer working in water resources and flooding. So my day-to-day work deals with too much water. When we have rainfall and the catchment responds, and sometimes it's okay, like the system, the drainage system, plus the rest of the major overland flow paths behave as they should, and it can handle that. But sometimes we get too much water too quickly and it overwhelms the system, and that can damage infrastructure, it can get into homes and cause a lot of heartache for a lot of people. And then when you add the lens of climate change, which the industry and the regulations and guidelines are still catching up as we get more and more data, more and more modeling, and more complex and climate scenarios that reflect socioeconomic pathways that the world could take. Add that complexity on, we're dealing with some things that, you know, sometimes for a short duration event, in 2090, you might be underestimating rainfall by 77%. So we're designing systems. We used to designing systems for like a single answer, and the client or the organizations we're working with, they need a single answer of like, what's the immunity, what's the capacity. But we've got probably double, triple the workload now to understand how much is too much and what can the system handle, what we should design to. So that's my most urgent problem at the moment. Yes. Without a crystal ball.
Yeah, so I guess, so I work for the Department of the Environment, Tourism, Science and Innovation, Queensland Department DETSI, will be shorter. And we look at how activities, including industries, mining activities, can impact on waterways and the water quality of those waterways. And at the moment, one challenge that we can see is how councils and water utilities are really challenged by the population growth that they see now and they see in the future, and even their prediction usually. So they try to design, so I'm talking about wastewater treatment plants. So it's a public infrastructure for, you know, the good for everyone. We want our wastewater to be treated, what's coming out of our toilets and in our house. And when they design, when they size those sewage treatment plants, they try to encompass for that, you know, future population growth. But it seems that now at the moment, even with the forecast that they have, they're actually reaching the forecast that they were planning for 10 years from now. So it's very difficult for them to design a plan for the future at the moment, and it means a lot of investment, a lot of financial resource that they don't necessarily have. And that pressure then becomes, a potential issue for the waterway, because if they can't handle all the wastewater that's coming through, it's going to go somewhere. And if it's not well treated, or if there's too much, then it potentially would end up, in the river. So we're working on that, trying to make sure that it doesn't happen. But yeah, that's a big challenge at the moment for us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharon McIntosh, and thank you for inviting me to speak today and be around my tribe, which is really cool. So thank you for that. I just want to give you a bit of a background on where I'm placed. So, God, over the last 20 years, I don't like to say that, I've worked in different environments, from agriculture, mining, to infrastructure. I grew up in farming, so I think that, and then coming down to the city, the one connector was always water, and it always will be. And I guess that drove my curiosity to look at climate. And as we've already spoken about, floods, drought, it's been something that's, contributed to a lot of the decisions I've made with my career and with my family, what we do. So I think for me, the climate aspect and having a younger generation, I think is instrumental that we actually do something like serious. And when it comes to policy, which is my background, this is where it all starts. And if we don't have the right decision makers in the room with the right information, we can't move anywhere. And from my experience, we need to have dedicated people with the understanding and the foresight to combine all of the different systems that we have to put together to make these things happen. Like everyone's got a place in this, whether it's me as a scientist, someone building the infrastructure. We can't do it without collaborating together. So I guess from my perspective, scarcity is a big thing, and not just here in Brisbane and Australia. Like I've done work overseas in developing nations. I've seen the impacts of scarcity, what that does to families, women and children, agriculture. So I think this is a very great conversation to be having today. So thank you.
Fantastic. I think you hit on something very key: the right people with the right information at the right time, setting policy properly. I think that's key to everything, and I'd like to see that happen big time, right? I mean, so that's just a key that kind of hit me right now. I go, you hit it right in the nail. All right. Okay, Himanthi, you mentioned that Australia designed standards underestimating rainfall by up to about 70%. What does that mean for the infrastructure already built? And how do we retrofit our cities for what is coming?
That's a very topical question, and we're working with on a lot of large infrastructure projects, investing in the order of billions of dollars on infrastructure that still have to stand the test of 10 years, 50 to 100 years, right? Yeah. And so we're coming from a time where we could design for it, but we're going into a time that we don't know what the future is going to look like. So we need to be more, and we used to design for hard infrastructure that, you build the pipes bigger and bigger, and then, but the current world we live in is, we're also in an affordability crisis. Yep. We're also in supply, restrictions, and we also have this layer of reducing our carbon footprint. So we have to think of infrastructure solutions that are more flexible, that might be taking a management approach of dealing with flood risk and stormwater flooding, that takes a more soft engineering approach with nature-based solutions and water-sensitive urban design. So thinking, and that takes planning at the forefront. because it's not something we can solve in a design stage, in a construction stage. It's something we need to plan for. The management, the using technology like flood forecasting, we've done a lot of work in around the world, in Bangkok and in Auckland. So using technology, machine learning, and then a management system around that to deal with flood risk. So yeah, it just takes a bit of out of the box kind of approaches, because we can't deal with throwing more concrete at it.
So you must trust your modeling a lot.
We depend on modeling. We use it to inform decisions, but it also requires a little bit of thinking around that. Yeah.
So it's not blind trust on the modeling.
No, you cannot trust a model. It's a yeah. It's a garbage in, garbage out.
So true. Vita, your work in French Polynesia highlighted how remoteness challenges clean water access. What parallels do you see with regional and remote Queensland?
Yeah, so when I work in Tahiti, in French Polynesia, I was mainly supporting councils to with their investment project and capital project, including related water-related ones. And that was, distribution, drinking water distribution networks, sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants. And so over there's around 200 islands scattered across the surface area of Europe. And access is very difficult. Transport is difficult. Bringing materials, bringing equipment is not that easy. When you have only one boat rotation per month, for example, and very costly as well. And most of those councils don't have a lot of, financial support. So it becomes really difficult in that way. But also, once we come and bring some treatment system there, if there's no skills, and I think we talked about that during the energy session, if there's no skills on the ground to actually operate those systems, maintain those systems, then it's basically just a waste of time and resource, because, at the end, the worst that can happen is that you're going to bring a great system, treatment system, or drinking water solution that will end up, not functioning after, a few months, a couple of years, and which would end up potentially creating more issues because people will still be relying on it, but it wouldn't actually treat the water the right way. And I think it's the same way that, same challenges that we have in remote communities in Australia and in Queensland, where, financially they don't have a lot of resource, they don't have a lot of skills on site. So yeah, same issue, I think. And I mean, what we came up with in terms of an approach was really to try to design simple systems, passive systems first, that someone on site would be able to manage and operate. But having that training and the upskilling of someone in the community to be able to manage that is really important. Not, come up with a bright idea. Oh yeah, we're going to put this really high-tech, system. It's going to be great. And then it's too complex for anyone to actually operate. So yeah, I think having simple, sustainable solutions on site and having skills on site is really important. But yeah, we have the same challenges within islands, in remote communities in Australia.
Perhaps as well, the energy requirements for those systems are a key factor. In fact, this ties to the previous session, very much so. So while I was sitting in the previous session, I was thinking the same thing. These things are so tied together, and especially in remote locations, without proper energy, some of these systems are totally irrelevant. Yeah, proper energy, and then even, financial way to actually pay for that energy as well. Yeah. Indeed. Sharon, your turn. You work at the intersection of policy and people. I think that's something that is quite difficult, for me at least. What lessons from your experience in agriculture and community water programs can you help us strengthen the equity and resilience in Australia?
One thing, or one lesson in regards to that question is, sorry, I'm used to speaking to my kids not so loud, but clearly not in this room, I'm sorry. So one lesson is that resilience, it starts locally, and that's one you really need to take on board. So in my experience with agriculture and community water programs, I've seen where governance and community actually having a say gets things done. And, you know, I'm always a big advocate for, I won't swear in this room, but getting stuff done and empowering a community. Like I've actually, just as a case study without naming names or locations, we had an area in Queensland where what they were getting charged for water was very inequitable, and it was an outdated policy. I went through it, I had a look at it. There was no reason for the government to continue pricing this particular region for the way they're pricing, other than it was archaic. So with working with the community, which requires a lot of trust, especially when you do have a relationship with not only ag, but you're working with government, politicians, the whole gamut, you have to gain that trust. And it's not an easy thing to try and change policy and explain to the government what will, not only with changing this policy, we're enabling a community to grow. So with the change of the policy that came with the advocacy, the data, the modelling, everything that I had to put together to prove to the government that this was going to be a win-win for them, was also a win-win for the community. I had case studies turned around from the community that I went out. I drove out, got the case studies, drove back, wrote them all up, had to present them to government on the Monday, DG, all of the likes. And then those case studies is what changed their decision. Not all the figures, yeah, they were great. It was going to be a bonus for the government. However, it was the fact that I had, you know, Jim, he could actually put his children to a private school. I had another guy who could put someone onto his farm to grow his farming. It was so impactful in regional communities that are, I guess, overwhelmed with the complexity of governance and regulation, being able to have a say to a policy decision that was going to impact them in the long term, and it incorporated climate, so their allocations were all tied to climate, etc. But for me, that's what builds equity and resilience in communities, and that's not just happening here in Queensland. You know, like that needs to happen everywhere. We need to empower communities, and this is something that needs to be a government community thing. But I do think transparency, the data wasn't transparent to anyone. And if I hadn't, I think I have got a passion for regional communities. I grew up in one. Without having that passion and that drive to see that community stay a community without being a ghost town like so many, I don't think they would have achieved that. And I think it's just having those conversations. It's the resilience of these communities that are driving change. So
I'm speechless. In the sense that when someone with a passion gets involved, gets things done, and gains the trust of the...
I'm called Get Shit Done Sharon.
Himanthi, you mentioned that in some other parts of the world, adaptation involves massive underground tunnels for flood storage, UK, Japan, and elevating highways and housing by many meters. What may an Australian equivalent look like that's lower carbon and locally appropriate?
Yeah, so this question, like what we're trying to suggest is that building on that, moving away from hard infrastructure solutions. Yes, it forms a part of it. It's an important part, but it causes us to move away from our silos a bit, where there are engineers and scientists and professionals in policy working in their own silos at the moment. So one of us will deal with too much water, one of us will deal with dirty water, one of us will deal with the water scarcity. But actually, linking all those up into thinking about it in one water cycle, so that my too much water, stormwater for example, rainwater, could actually solve a water scarcity issue in a couple of years' time. Or stormwater from development, all the housing that we have to build in the next decade, all this housing estates will generate more stormwater, but it'll also impact water quality. It'll impact the waterways of the neighborhoods that these houses are built in. So what if we manage the quantity of water and the quality with the same system? So the systems thinking piece, we did some work with in the Lockyer Valley with urban utilities, and the systems thinking piece forced us to think out of the silos, think with the community, think with the local government, and explore what that systems look like and how our engineered infrastructure systems interacted with that. And then brought in the lens of flooding, and flooding in these upper catchments. When there's erosion, eroded stream banks, these are the sources of the sediment in the Moreton Bay. So what if we had a soft infrastructure solution to revegetate those stream banks? And that would help that water quality impact that we get in the flood events. So that's an example of how we could do system thinking a bit more and work out of our silos and together in an integrated way.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Sharon was sharing before. It's that working with, in this case, will be the science engineering community to come up with a solution. So yeah, fantastic. Vita, you spoke about regulation as both protective and restrictive. How can we reframe it so the industry and the public see it as an enabling sustainable development?
Yeah, so I guess talking about regulation, so as part of the work that we do, so I'm within the science area of Dead Sea, and part of the work we do is that we look at, as I said, industries, activities that have the potential to impact on waterways. And we do that under a regulatory framework, which is under the Environmental Protection Act. From, comparing that regulation with, regulation in French Polynesia, for example, it's much more detailed here. It's much more much more thorough and protective, as you said, and that's because also we have such a big monitoring program within Queensland. So the department is doing a lot of surveillance of the water quality of a lot of waterways across southeast Queensland, the Great Barrier Reef catchment and all of that. And that gives us information and scientific data to make decisions. And so in that way, yes, the regulation is quite, protective, but it's really evidence-based and it's data-based, which is a good thing compared to, regulation in other parts of the world where you actually can't rely on the ground data. So you're sort of using information from another country that has nothing to do with the water quality of your waterways locally. So it's really, I think in that way, it's protective, but it's also fit for purpose. And that regulation is not just there to protect the environment. So that regulation aims to protect Queensland environment, and it, talking about waste, land, air quality, so it's not just water. But it also aims to allow sustainable development for a better quality of life. And in there, there's for example, there's a management hierarchy for waste or for water, surface water, which is very well, in tune with, sustainability concepts as well. So what we ask usually small businesses or industries is to look at, that hierarchy to first reduce the water that they use. Second, to try to look at, treatment option and recycling option. So those are the preferred ways to go. And then if they can't do that, or if it's not reasonable or, financially or socially, then if the only choice for them is to release contaminants to the waterway, to release contaminants, then there's another, piece of work where they need to look at the potential to release those contaminants to land rather than water, so that they don't actually pollute the water. So it's not a regulation that's just strict, oh no, you can't do this because, you're going to impact. It's looking at the environment, but also the social and economic aspect of any particular activity, I guess. So I think in that way, hopefully it's reframing that regulation.
Yeah, quite well aware of the regulations. I'm currently working on some projects that require us to monitor the quality of the water that is released into the stormwater system. So very well aware of everything that needs to happen. But at the same time, I see that there are other areas that can be improved a lot more as far as what is being released into the waterways or even into the ground, because contaminants will stay, some of them will stay for quite a while, so yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not perfect, nothing is perfect, but the Queensland government, the department is really there to help industries and activities when they have an issue, to discuss with them, and the scientific sort of area, my area will come and try to find pragmatic solutions to the issue, while still protecting the environment but still allowing the activity to happen.
Thank you. Sharon, when floods or droughts hit, communities often fill the gaps. How do we build on this community capital without burning it out?
Yes, I think we are burning it out.
Yeah.
And community capital is a powerful asset. It really is. But without the support from institutions, we are going to continue to burn communities out. So for me, very strong. But policy, again, it all comes back to that damn policy. And giving communities greater access and enabling them to have a say. And that's exactly what it comes back. So local organisations need to be empowered, especially in these extreme events. We've seen communities being completely washed out. I mean, look at Lismore, for example. Were they empowered with organisations there? No, not at all. Not until way after the fact. That community pulled together, and that's what they do. But we are burning these communities out by continually having to have them volunteer. I mean, I've got a father in a remote community. Well, it's not that remote, but, their community together, when there's fires, they've got their rural fire brigade, then they're involved in, doing tree breaks, getting all of the clutter out of the riverbanks to ensure that the rivers flow in droughts, in the flood, sorry. So there's so many things that community do to already try to manage the impacts from floods, droughts, fires, that we need to start investing. We really do. You know, investing now. And one thing from my experience over the years is I'm sick of seeing a reactive policy, reactive this, reactive everything. Proactive, and being proactive now, preparing for the future. You know, like, we've got the younger generation speaking about this. Why aren't we taking notice? You know, be proactive. Get your ESG right. Be serious about all your social governance. It keeps being thrown around like it's a, you know, it's a little tick box. It's not a tick box. These communities need their local members. They need their local governments. They need organisations to invest money to empower them to be ready. And that's not meaning every single person and every single family is doing the volunteer stuff every time there's a flood, every time there's a drought. It needs to be organised way before the effect. And now that we know that this is happening more and more, and we've got engineers, we've got policy, regulatory experts working on this, you know, exactly what was said before. We can't work in silos. That's done. Been and gone. 70s, 80s, 90s, tick, gone. We have to work together going forward. That's just, I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the way building communities is going to survive.
So the word is out, proactive. Gospel, proactive.
It is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
Proactive.
that's what we need to concentrate on.
Yep.
Okay, so how are we doing with time? Yeah? Yeah?
So this is just to give an example of my local community, because I work in Riverstone, which is in New South Wales, and in general practice, and we have lots of suburbs built on flood zones. But the community thing is that we're in a northwest growth area in Sydney, and it is a flood zone. And the local business chamber, the leaders understand climate change. These are the small businesses around the area, and our local community service, which looks after flood victims, we are all working together, and the whole area has been bought by a property developer called Cara. And what they've done is they've brought in architects and town planners from Copenhagen. So they've looked at the whole property and looked at nature-based solutions for the area. So they've done a model, and we're kind of one big, and our state member is absolutely passionate about this. I took a photo of this and sent it to him. And he says, that's great, because I was saying congratulations, because he is passionately supportive of this. So we've got the business chamber, the local community group, and my local politicians, and the property developer understanding this problem. So the future of this area, because we are a big growth area in Western Sydney, we're a big advocacy arm for the planning minister and the future planning. So communities can work together.
Anyway, that's a really great example of how the community can advocate and demand these outcomes. I think that was one of the actions we were told to think of some actions. And I was going to say to drive through our market demand, better outcomes for communities, better, tree canopies and things about, things that people want to live to preserve the city that we have, city of Brisbane and the beyonds, by pressuring the government, but also pressuring the private sector to deliver.
Yeah, no, I think it's a it's a really good example of people working together, and I think communities can really lead the change as well, because they can advocate for something, and I mean, government will react, and will respond, and if there's more communities leading the way, then it will also change the way I think regulation could work. Yeah.
Hello, is that working? I just wanted to say thanks for all offering your various perspectives on this. My professional background is in architecture. I'm currently leading a project at Hamilton, which is a Green Star apartment building that will contain 150 kilolitres of rainwater storage, which will be recycled. But just touching on what Vatia said about regulations, because of regulations, we can only really use that for irrigating plants. There's no dual reticulation in the building, so that's not going to flush toilets even.
Yeah.
It's just 150 kilolitres that fills up anytime we get a rainfall event, and then it gets discharged to the Brisbane River. So I think connecting with what Imanti said about systems thinking, looking at how can we look at stormwater as a resource rather than just something that's waste that we dispose of. I mean, how can we increase the biodiversity of our waterways? How can we top up our aquifers? And then, what are the kind of collective action things that we can do? Like drawing on what Sharon was saying about policy and kind of the big levers there, because, 150 kilolitres is great, but it's not solving the problem. We need megalitre scale solutions, and individuals putting rainwater tanks in their backyards or in their apartment buildings is just not going to get us there. I mean, we're a very lucky country in so many ways. We have the resources, we have the scale, we have the rainfall. I mean, look at South Africa, look at sub-Saharan Africa. And I mean, to touch briefly on what Sharon was saying about crises, there's funding in Australia for crisis response when there are floods, when there are bushfires, but there's no political points for building out the capacity ahead of demand, whether that's making decisions about where we should and shouldn't be building cities, or whether it's just putting the infrastructure in place to kind of support that growth. So I think we have the opportunity to kind of be a bit of a pilot, I guess, for the world, and to kind of showcase some of the best practice in urban water use and design. But I think we also need to kind of consider the global equity piece of what are we doing here that can be applied in places like India, in places like sub-Saharan Africa, in places like Gaza, where there are really shocking levels of inequality and ability to access water. So that's kind of what's keeping me up at night a little bit.
I love that. Thank you.
I was just going to say, 150 kilolitres of water. Actually, today I was actually sampling one of those tanks to analyze it and to be able to improve that water that can be used safely. Unfortunately, I think it is unfortunate that there is no regulation in Australia for self-sustainable water, for rural and semi-rural occasions. I have visited places where water, the water that you see is like a cup of tea, and they've been drinking it and they have no filters. And they've been doing it for the last 20 years. And so my job, my mantra, my ethos is to create water snobs. When I say water snobs, is that people then realize that there is a different kind of water that they can drink. There is a better quality of water that they can drink. So once I finish with a project that people absolutely love, and they carry their water from home to even the most fancy restaurants, because they will not trust the water anywhere else. So that's why I say I create water snobs. But yeah, what you're saying, 150 kilolitres of water, and if it's not used properly, the only thing you can use is what? To water the garden? That water can be used for drinking if done and treated properly. That whole idea of sustainability in our community where we live, Glorious, Nebo, Mount Mee, all around the outskirts of Brisbane, we all about sustainability of water. We all worry about the drop of water that falls from the sky. How do we use it properly? How do we take care of it? How clean is it? That is happening already. The community is getting involved in knowing and learning about water quality. At the beginning, you had a page that said water and action on the bottom. I love that. Water and action. That's what this is all about. And pro-action more than proactive. That's a gospel that I like to call it now. Call it the gospel word, proactive. Right, any other questions?
I just wanted to add, maybe just to respond to that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so back in the days, I did work on the recycling stormwater system in New South Wales, and we were, planning to recycle the water for cooling towers. So there was also, a way to do it. But I think, beyond the regulation piece, or, there's a planning sort of approach to that. There's also the community perception and the social perception, especially if we talk about drinking water. There's at least one council who tried to do, dual reticulation and use recycled water, and it actually didn't end up working because there was a blockage from people to, in terms of safety of the water, is it really safe to actually reuse, so I'm not talking about stormwater, but wastewater, is it really safe to reuse that water? So I think there's also, and it's done in other countries, not a lot, but it's done in other countries. So I think there's also that, aspect that we need to take into account, is that social perception of, recycling as well.
Sorry, there was a question there? Yes, go ahead. Should be up.
Now? I'll just hold it on. Okay. Hello, my name's Monique. My background is in both economics and in chemistry. Hang on, I'm sorry, that's really bad timing. I really liked what you were saying, Himanthi, about taking everybody out of silos. People operating in silos essentially causes what I viewed when I started my studies, which was there is the economic view and then there is the science view, and those things were never working together. And I went out of my way to try to understand better both sides of that same coin, because the money has to come from somewhere. Every single thing we've discussed today costs money and nobody wants to part with it. And so my question is, other than just putting pressure on governments, putting pressure on large corporations, what kind of things can we do to incentivise those people that have that money to part with that money for the purpose of making these changes? Because things like, more recycling, more forecasting, more future-proofing, those things don't have an immediate financial benefit. These are all social benefits. These are all, the sorts of reputational benefits and things like social governance requirements, but where's the incentive? And so I wondered, what are your ideas about how governments and large corporations can benefit from investing in sustainable changes to things like water infrastructure?
I would say tax. Tax them. Yeah, let's just tax them. No, I think when it comes, just for a household, I would say incentivise more water saving. I mean, I know it happens in different councils here, there and everywhere, but be serious about it. Let's not just have a one-off, we're going to give someone a $15 discount in low rates. Not everyone owns a house. That's the reality of it. So that's not going to impact the majority. If you've got a building and most people are renting in that building, what do they get? It's the same story for solar. I think you need to incentivise, buy money, but not make it one part of the community. It needs to be the whole community, and it can be done. They do it in Europe and places like that. So I just think small It doesn't need to be large things, you know, like we've got one council, I think it's Brisbane City Council, that incentivise your waste. You know, you can have those waste things in your kitchen and they help with that. They're little things. You don't have to have a mortgage. You don't have to pay rates. They're just little things and they all add up. And that's, I think, from my ESG perspective, it doesn't need to be big, ever.
I think so. Co-benefits and like communicating those co-benefits of, you know, if we do, you know, if we make a infrastructure decision in one way, what if we could deliver benefits for water quality? What if we could deliver benefits for community, urban heat, island effect, all those things? And so I think, in order to communicate that, you need to know that that benefit exists. So quantifying and modeling, more integrated modeling, is something that we need to work towards, and we need to have a balance. Like, there's modeling for compliance, but there's modeling for design, coming up with solutions. And I think bringing together things and achieving more with the money we have, with the infrastructure we have. I know we moved away from talking about recycled water, but we have a piece of infrastructure that was $2.5 billion to build at the time, and then all the embodied carbon of building that scheme, the Western Corridor Recycled Water Scheme, that can deliver 232 megalitres per day. So you were angry about 150 litres. We have a facility, a scheme that can deliver 232 megalitres per day in drought. But what if we could deliver water now so that we don't have to get to a position, and so we don't have to build more desalination plants and create a larger carbon footprint and spend more money. So I just don't know how that equation, without bringing into the water quality, our waterways, rivers, Moreton Bay can't take on any more sediment and nutrient. It can't. So if we're having a population of an additional million people, additional million homes, that's going to discharge 1 million people's worth of wastewater, how is that going to work? So that doesn't come into that equation of the dollars, unfortunately. And so that's why you do need to have an integrated approach to financial and business cases. Otherwise, you end up with solutions like more desal plants, or, when we have an existing scheme that could service 1 million people today.
My take, before just quick take, it's how you put this forward, both to governments and to us, the population. It's how you sell it, how you market it. Because the economics of good water goes a long way. There is a good synergy between the two. Health, industry, production of food, etc. So it's how we market everything. Sorry, there was a question behind you.
It's a quick one. I would just like to bounce back on what you said, Sharon, on community engagement and so on, and that we sort of have the power to actuate change or implement change. But I also have the feeling that sometimes when the community tries to drive change, it's actually confronted to a lot of regulation from councils. And I was just wondering how you as a professional, and also you, Aminti, when you talk to implementing nature-based solution into your planning, how do you approach councils and other organization institutions with those sort of unusual solutions?
So what is good is in Queensland we have good regulation that has enabled a great uptake in water-sensitive urban design, and it has opened up. But I think sometimes in the implementation it has fallen short in shortcutting and tick-the-box exercises. But we also work with the state kind of
departments and various infrastructure they deliver, and they go through a different process to council. And you kind of, you propose these solutions with also the benefit that, the cost benefit, the other benefits, and delivering, you know, two in one. So yeah, is that right? So I don't think the council is it's open to new ideas because it wants to deliver, for example, stormwater offset projects. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll quickly, just from my experience, when we've had those issues, I've worked on the Barumba project with an energy corporation. I don't get everyone in the same room at the same time because there is too much regulation talk. No one talks to the other one initially. So in my work, I've had the community in one room. You have your discussion, you go back, you have a discussion, because you've really got to iron out the negotiation piece early on before you go back into, you know, the ring, so to speak. So for me, it's making policy regulation very clear, articulate it with clarity, and make sure everyone understands on both sides of the discussion piece before you get everyone in that one room. Yeah, otherwise you will have a boxing ring. So that's just my experience. Chat later if you want.
Yeah. Probably a comment. I'm Joseph Tam. I work for SQ Water and Recycle Water. Thanks for mentioning the Western Corridor. It's something that I spend a lot of time on. But today I'm wearing my hat as Engineer Australia because I got to be careful while I'm talking. On the topic about recycled water, and this gentleman talks about stormwater, I can talk a lot about those potentials. But surely what he mentioned that it's a big scheme already there, right? So why not using it? So from my knowledge, it's about political decision, it's about scare campaign, and you know about the Toowoomba referendum, you know, the people vote against it, but there's only a proportion of the population. Now, Sharon talks a lot about the people's choice, right? And I strongly believe that's the way to go, right? So we have a scheme there, but we're not spending money on educating the community about what's this about. Now, Sydney Water is doing that. America spent a lot of dollars. Perth also, you know, doing some similar stuff. But we're not doing it. We're scared to talk about it. So what I've been advocating is actually we start educating community about recycled water for drinking, and with science and data, we put the decision to the community, right? So whatever the decision made by the community, government take it on board. It's quick for them. We listen to the community. So that would be a good way forward rather than shy away, not talking about it, and keeping it as a drought response measure at the moment. Now, farmers are screaming for water, like during drought or security. We can use that water at a higher price. We need to talk about that. But I think the key message is about making a decision on the schemes. Because if you reserve it for climate drought response, you never know it's going to work when you need it. You need to keep investing money 10, 20, 30 years. Are you sure the scheme will work to the extent that you want it, right? So he mentioned about a good point where if we can use it on a regular basis, we can avoid having diesel, right? But eventually, I can tell you, we need diesel in SQ, right? I'll talk to you another time, but I'll just share some insight. Thank you.
I'm going to call a timeout on that. And I feel really sad because I know there's a lot of conversations, but I'm really hoping the panel are going to stay for a bit afterwards because I feel like there's some people that really want to talk to you. Can we please thank this amazing panel? It's really hard to shove stuff into an hour. I appreciate that. But the insights that we got from that, I think, have given us all a lot of food for thought. it's one thing that when I go into businesses, no one's talking about water, and it drives me crazy. It really drives me crazy. Everyone's talking about energy, everyone's talking about waste, but no one's talking about water, and I always say, what about the water? So I was super excited about this panel. We have a dinner break from 6:30 till 7. So basically there's some food out there. We're going to come back and have a community-led session, which is innovative businesses that are doing great stuff. So please come back here for 7 o'clock and learn about some community leaders that are doing some amazing things. Thank you so, so much.